Capitol Hill is busy.
Really busy. Well, in there at least.
Throughout the year, 100 senators and 435 representatives come from across the country to our nation's capital. While there, thousands of bills are introduced and 4 to 6 million words of new laws are passed each 2-year Congress, give or take the level of gridlock or general chaos each session.
Move to strike the ladies.
But even beyond the legislative grunt work, 81 million messages are received by constituents each year. House and Senate committees hold dozens of hearings each week, and Hill offices average around 28 meetings each day. Clearly, this work can't be done alone. It takes over 17,000 staffers across member, leadership, and committee offices to help grease DC's wheels. 17,000. That's 5 digits. I just checked. This includes legislative directors, staff assistants, grant office managers, communications workers. You get the picture. It's a lot, but even this 17,000 number pales in comparison to the up to 40,000 interns who walk the halls of Congress each year. That's right, 40,000 Hillterns. In early 2020, I was one of these interns. Here's me. Don't I look handsome? A fresh face from little old Indiana, earning my little old degree in little old political science. I got the opportunity to man a congressional front desk, walk and tweet among those who write our laws, and of course, respond to an estimated 1 billion phone calls about COVID-19. Yeah, it was a fun time to be a congressional intern. For this work, I got paid $1,800 a month. This doesn't seem like a lot, and honestly, it really isn't. This pay averaged below DC's minimum wage at the time. And trust me, I was put to work. Guys, the congressman himself had to come up and teach me how to use a fax machine. They still use fax machines over there. But let me tell you, had I gotten that internship just 2 years prior in 2018, I would have gotten a whole lot less. 0 to be exact. A big old lemon. A big old lemon. Yes, I went to the store and I bought a lemon just for this video. Just go with it, okay? So what happened? Other than how awesome I was as an intern, why did I get paid? And why do most Capitol Hill interns get paid now? Join me and these smart folks as we explore the history of intern pay, examine the communications campaign behind getting interns paid on Capitol Hill, and discover what the future of the Pay Our Interns movement might have in store. Capitol Hill internships started a lot earlier than you might think, and not in the way we see them today.
Communications was very different when this country was founded.
This is Jane Campbell, President and CEO of the United States Capitol Historical Society, and also what I like to call a certified smart person.
Go all the way back to before the onset of the Revolutionary War. Young boys aided the Continental Congress by sending messages and running errands for the delegates.
This unofficial intern-like work continued in the Capitol.
In 1824, 12-year-old James Time was on the Senate payroll. Now, he didn't have a formal title, but records show that that's what he was doing. He was passing messages.
1827 and 1829 saw the House of Representatives and Senate use the title of page to describe young boys who would deliver messages throughout the Capitol. What we would sort of consider an intern today. A reminder.
When Congress first started in 1789, they did so without really hardly any congressional staff. The desks on the floor is where the members did all their work.
So even having these pre-pubescent messengers running around was seen as quite the expansion of staff back then. I personally think that if I had to be around that many preteens all day, I'd quit on the spot. Like what am I, a camp counselor or something? Fast forward to 1910, and we saw the modernization of how Congress operates after the revolt of Speaker Joseph Cannon. And yes, Hillterns, the building's named after him. So this revolt led to committees and committee chairs having a lot more power and a lot more things to do.
Work of the government became more expansive. The staff became more expansive.
In 1959, the Senate's annual report included, for the first time, official payroll for 6 research interns. 2 years later, President John F. Kennedy gave a famous, rousing speech. Can you guess which one? Don't worry, it's the obvious one. Roll the clip.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
With America inspired by this call for public service, Hill internships boomed.
In 1963, the House Internship Program was formally created. In 1965, the House passed legislation that set aside funds to hire summer interns.
By 1971, nearly every House office offered paid internships. The average pay coming around to
$300 a month.
With inflation, am I allowed to say that word nowadays? That's about 22 grand a year. Things seem to be moving in the right direction for Hillterns wanting some moolah. 3 years later, the Lyndon B. Johnson Congressional Internship Program was created, which paid interns around $500 a month in Congress. The 1980s saw around 80% of Senate offices paying their interns. But then we reached the 90s. Anyways, amid Beanie Babies and Blockbuster Video came austerity measures. Now that's some grade A nostalgia right there, am I right, Gen X? So in 1992, then governor of Arkansas and amateur saxophonist Bill Clinton promised that he would cut the budget if elected president.
They've proposed a new plan investing in people, detailing $140 billion in spending cuts they'd make right now. Clinton Gore, for people, for a change.
Spoiler alert, he won. And then followed through on his promises. Politicians can do that, you know. And after this,
Congress felt compelled to follow suit.
So then Democratic Speaker of the House and I guess gym enthusiast Tom Foley implemented 4% budget cuts for Congress. And these cuts included the Lyndon B. Johnson Internship Program. In May 1994, offices saw their funding stripped as they struggled to pay incoming summer interns. Then came the midterms. Dun, dun, dun. With the 94 elections just months away, GOP House leaders Dick Armey and Newt Gingrich wrote what they called the Contract with America. Introduced in a September 1994 speech on the floor of Congress by Gingrich, this 4-pager includes some major reforms to the way Congress operates. This included conducting a comprehensive audit of Congress for waste, fraud, or abuse, as well as cutting the number of House committees and cutting committee staff by 1/3. As Gingrich put it,
it's time to force the government to live within its means and to restore accountability to the budget in Washington.
Gingrich basically wanted a clean house. Well, clean the house, I guess. Anyways, this meant slashing the congressional budget. There's something kinda like that going on right now with one federal agency. So this legislative agenda was widely adopted by the GOP at the time. In fact, just 5 days after Gingrich's speech, over 300 Republican congressional candidates met on the steps of the Capitol to sign this proposed contract. Ultimately, Election Day came, and America was on board with this contract. Like, really on board. In what historians refer to as the Republican Revolution, the GOP gained a whopping 54 House seats and 8 Senate seats to take majorities in both chambers. It was a complete wipeout that few experts predicted. Not a single Republican incumbent in the House or Senate lost re-election.
I mean, if this is not a mandate to move in a particular direction, I would like somebody to explain to me what a mandate would look like.
So roll around to 1995, and the new Congress starts. And so does that slashing. Again, politicians can follow through on their promises, guys. A huge nail in the coffin came with the Congressional Accountability Act of 1995. This legislation codified minimum wage and labor protections for Hill staff, but specifically excluded interns in its text. And so for the most part, Hill internships remained this way for decades. No significant legislation was proposed to address this, and activism remained fairly low. In 2017, only 10% of congressional interns were paid. So that's the general rundown on the history of Hillterns and how they gained and lost their pay. Pretty cool stuff, I know. Well, I mean, I guess that's it. Wait a second, what's the title of this documentary again? Oh, right. Let's fast forward to 2016. 2 former unpaid interns, armed with a Facebook group, looked around and said,
you know what, screw this, like this cycle needs to end.
Unpaid internships are a huge problem.
These are Guillermo Creamer and Mark Vera. These certified smart people founded the nonprofit group Pay Our Interns in 2016. The movement's origin is a very modern story. A Facebook group created by two frustrated former interns. But they both told me it wasn't exactly their own situations that ignited the organization's flame.
I found out that my mentee was doing an unpaid Hill internship and that he had skipped out on buying groceries to pay for the dry cleaning cost.
I didn't want my sister, who was younger than me, to go through the same thing I was going through. Like, I felt like I was jumping through hoops in order to be an unpaid intern.
These personal connections are the beating heart of many advocacy efforts. Greg Lavoie wrote in a Psychology Today op-ed that activism is a byproduct, not a motive. It starts with passion, not strategy. The more personal your connection to a cause, emotional, not intellectual, the more motivated you'll be. These two clearly had the passion and emotional connection to really jumpstart their campaign. Their Facebook posts were simple at first. A story of an unpaid intern struggle, public data on the harsh reality that many interns face, or even a simple meme just airing out the frustrations that many of these interns felt. These messages resonated with a lot of people, both on and off the Hill, as their organizations spread their social media presence to Instagram and Twitter.
The social media campaign of all of this allowed for us to truly start a reach that we weren't expecting.
That December, NPR wrote a story on Pay Our Interns, saying that they were challenging DC's tradition of unpaid government internships. People were starting to pay attention to the group.
We were getting kind of the feedback from folks where it was like, how do we turn this into real advocacy? And that's where Carlos and I really had to kind of sit ourselves down and really analyze what it meant to be an advocacy group.
And this is a great question. What does it mean to be an advocacy group? Well, this may shock you, but it's a little bit complicated. Policymaking exists in a vast ecosystem. John Kingdon, another certified smart person, views it through the multiple streams framework. You can find a lot of perspectives out there, but I like what John Kingdon has to say here. In the chaotic world of crafting and passing policy, he outlines 3 streams of influence: the problem stream, the politics stream, and the policy stream. Now, I'm going to explain these streams as simply as I can, but just know that I'm trying here. Kingdon can get a little wordy. The problem stream. This stream helps recognize an issue and define specific problems. For there to be any action on a problem, first there needs to be a problem recognized. The politics stream. This stream considers the current political climate surrounding an issue, including who's in charge, public opinion, and the level of power of involved interest groups. And finally, the policy stream. This stream helps create and fine-tune policy solutions for said problem. Now, I'm going to quote Kingdon directly for this next part because I really like the specific way he says it right here. So these 3 streams are largely independent of one another, and each develops according to its own dynamics and rules. But at some critical junctures, the 3 streams are joined, and the greatest policy changes grow out of that coupling of problems, policy proposals, and politics. All this talk of streams. I mean, at this rate, I might as well take it to the Potomac or something.
Did you get it?
Anyways, being able to blend these 3 streams together to pass legislation is a big deal. Kingdon calls those able to master this magical ability policy entrepreneurs. So how can these two, starting out with just a social media platform and a small bit of press, become these elusive policy entrepreneurs? Well,
it truly was the perfect storm.
So Pay Our Interns had already built up heaps of anecdotal evidence through their social media presence. With unpaid internships being the norm on Capitol Hill now for decades, these folks were pissed and not afraid to share their stories. From working a 7 to 3 shift at a hotel on weekends to afford rent while interning, to having to turn down career opportunities because they couldn't afford an unpaid internship, Pay Our Interns was highlighting these stories left and right. However, this anecdotal evidence can only get you so far. As one meta-analysis finds, As one meta-analysis finds, in situations where emotional engagement is relatively low, where a lot of members of Congress stand, statistical evidence is more persuasive than anecdotal evidence. If members of Congress were to be swayed towards supporting intern pay, then they'd need The cold hard facts. However, there was a major problem.
There was no data on who paid or who didn't.
And frankly, there wasn't a good compiled document out there either about why these unpaid Hillternships were bad. Well, what's Pay Our Interns gonna do now? Go to every single office and ask them if they pay their interns or not?
We went to basically every office, knocked on doors, we're calling, looking up online.
Very quick 1-minute conversations at the front offices.
Oh, okay. This data collection grunt work began in January of 2017 and was done primarily by Carlos and an intern from GWU named Daniel.
We paid him, of course.
You'd hope so. But keep in mind, Carlos and Guillermo were a bunch of 21, 22-year-olds with an intern who wasn't much younger than them. It was hard for offices to take them seriously when they walked in.
We weren't speaking to anyone beyond the office manager. Those first conversations were very much entry-level folks who sometimes were intern themselves.
Pay Our Interns thankfully received help from D&P Strategies, a lobbying firm ran by
A power lesbian couple.
Hell yeah. The firm's first pro bono clients ever, D&P Strategies was able to secure meetings with congresspersons and their staff for Pay Our Interns. Soon enough, word got around about these pesky young politicos digging for data.
Offices started talking to each other.
By the summer, this organization was becoming a talk of the town as they meticulously compiled their congressional report. And as Pay Our Interns neared the end stages of this report, some in Congress were trying to get ahead of the story before it dropped.
You actually had one office who, to this day we've respected and not named, called us like literally 3 days before the release of our white pages. How do you have us listed? Well, we have you listed as you don't offer paid internships. You know, we'd like for you to hold off on publishing that. We're not really beholden to anyone. Like, we're releasing on this day. Okay. About 24 hours later, we got a call from that office. We found the money to offer a paid internship.
Like I said, this upcoming report was already making waves before it was even released. On June 27, the report dropped. Experience doesn't pay the bills. Why paid internships are a must in Congress. 2 days later, they held a Hill briefing.
Massive crowd. I mean, we probably had 120 people for a room that could fit 30.
The compacted statistics on the harm of unpaid internships sent a clear message to policymakers as to why Pay Our Interns' mission was critical. They outlined the problem and made it easily digestible. So the big problem?
Those unpaid interns were still part of that pipeline into Congress. Like, that's how it works. Very little entry-level congressional positions don't go to interns that were on the Hill. So if that unpaid intern is at such a high cost, then ultimately who's actually your entry-level employee? It's the people who could afford to work like that.
You end up with shitty, out-of-touch legislation and policy.
But that's just compiling the information out there that already exists about unpaid internships. What I'm curious about is what did they find from that door-to-door data? Man, those are some low numbers right there, especially in the House. Now, with the Democratic Party being such staunch supporters of, raising the minimum wage, job creation for the youths, and more, it's definitely going to take some unique messaging to reach Republicans on this issue. Pay Our Interns is going to have to... Hold the phone, folks. I've received some news.
Oh shit. More Republicans are paying than Democrats, like 2-1. Like, it wasn't even close. Let's exploit this.
So Pay Our Interns laid out the problem and found something quite interesting in the process. A lot of Democrats were talking the talk, but they weren't walking the walk. And this meant chunking a lot of preconceived notions out the door for Carlos and Guillermo. Both of them were pretty frank with me about their Democratic-leaning political affiliations, and also how much of a surprise uphill battle it was to get congressional Democrats on board with this.
I did find it very interesting that no Democrat wanted to talk about this, given how, labor rights and living wage, so on and so forth, are so important to like the central tenets of the party.
I was pretty captivated by my party, thinking that this was going to be an easy sell to Democrats, and it wasn't. It wasn't at all.
So now it's time to present this issue in a way that can get both Democrats and Republicans on board. Sounds just as easy as you think it is.
The great divide in American politics shows no sign of closing or even quieting down.
A Pew study finds 81% of voters say they cannot agree with the other side on basic facts. In June of 2016, a Pew study discovered that 49% of Republicans and 55% of Democrats say they are afraid, yes, afraid of the other party.
Polarization in Congress is at an all-time high in this contemporary era of politics. The last thing that Pay Our Interns wants to do is turn this into a lightning rod Democrat versus Republican issue, or else the legislation is not going to get really far. That's why, for the most part, Pay Our Interns tried to make this issue as nonpartisan as they could.
We wanted it to be so that everyone could see themselves play a role in the advocacy work.
The group was even registered as a 501c3 nonprofit instead of a 501c4 nonprofit, meaning that they're prohibited from supporting or opposing candidates for elected public office and must only engage in nonpartisan advocacy. This effort continued even as other folks tried their hardest to polarize the issue.
There were moments where people were trying to make this very partisan, and I very much controlled the image of the group, what we said, what we didn't.
Beyond remaining nonpartisan, talking to offices was critical, and not just having conversations with offices, but crafting how those conversations would go. Framing was critical.
What's framing, Max?
I'm glad you asked, mysterious voice. According to Olasunkanmi Arowolo, frames can be defined as organizing ideas or themes, ways of linking together stories historically, building up a narrative over time and across political space. This can influence the choices people make about how to process that information. Ultimately, the group had to discuss internship pay differently from office to office.
We recognize the power of code switching. We recognized what it meant to really go into an office and truly identify with that office.
This especially meant keeping in mind the political party affiliation of each congressperson.
For Democrats, it was, don't be hypocrites. You're about to, run up for re-election and you're talking about raise the wage, and you don't pay your interns a peanut.
We would talk about the importance of ensuring that all individuals had the opportunity to really come in, and how that would help primarily low-income, Black and brown folks and folks from different diverse backgrounds.
For Republicans, it was not about diversity, so on and so forth. It was more of hey, everyone should have a fair shot. You're not giving a handout. People that are going to intern are still going to have to work.
How do we ensure that the coal miner, the farmer's kid, how are they going to have the access to the Capitol the way that everyone else does?
Different ways to frame an issue, all with the common goal of getting offices to pay their interns, and with the eventual goal of hopefully getting legislation to tackle this widespread lack of intern pay. Some weren't a fan of this tactic, however. The group received pushback, with critics claiming,
if you change your message for one group versus another, you're compromising your values.
Their response?
I think that's 100% wrong.
The data backs this up too. At the end of the day, human beings don't really act rationally. Sorry to break it to you. BLUESKY and Kahneman demonstrated that we are consistently irrational, relying on a number of mental shortcuts to speed up our reasoning, which can make us remarkably sensitive to how things are framed. This includes legislators. So ultimately, trying to reach these policymakers involves this rhetorical framing sort of song and dance. However, sometimes even outside forces did effective framing for Pay Our Interns.
A new analysis shows 95% of politicians that back minimum wage hikes do not pay their own interns, including Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senator Cory Booker, and Senator Chris Murphy.
Looks like a little hypocrisy, doesn't it?
Well, that's a nice strong word to use. How about this one? Do as we say, not as we do.
Why don't they go out in public then and show their face when they do that?
Beyond attacking Democrats, I found some interesting messaging too.
The feeling was that you should pay interns because it costs money to be an intern. You've got to live somewhere, you've got to clothe yourself. And if you don't pay them anything, then you're simply giving jobs to the sons and daughters of the rich. You're giving opportunity to the rich so that they can get on the ground floor. So pay them something and open it up to all kinds of people.
This was on Fox and Friends, guys. And they didn't even directly cite Pay Our Interns here. Don't worry though, they definitely cited the group plenty over the years. And this coverage extended beyond just the Fox News cinematic universe at this point. The right wing, the left wing, the local wing, the legacy wing. The entire media sphere was picking up what Pay Our Interns was putting down, and they were making the issue palatable to everyone. Ultimately, Pay Our Interns found a way to pitch their message as a nonpartisan one in a highly partisan time in American history. They did this mainly by letting the data speak for itself, having concerted, well-framed conversations with these offices, and of course, by letting Fox News and other outlets have the dirty circus politicking work done by them. So we've got the problem, and we've got the politics. And now it's time we navigate policy. It's time for Pay Our Interns to feed legislators solutions. Will they bite? So the main goal of Pay Our Interns is like kinda obvious, y'all. It's in the name. They want interns to be paid, right now on Capitol Hill. But the policy stream is so much more than that. At this critical early stage, they had to decide what specific policies they wanted to push for and how to get them implemented. The group luckily did an excellent job of this in their initial report. They even labeled it in this neat little section called recommendations. Pro tip, if you want a successful report, I highly recommend a table of contents. It's great for people who have to read like tens of thousands of words each day for their job, or for generally lazy people like me. Anyways, the group outlined 4 key recommendations in this first report. Number 1, state your pay. Interns ought to know whether you intend to pay them or not before they apply. Remember how much trouble Pay Our Interns had getting the data?
There was no data on who paid or who didn't.
Come on, people. Number 2, clearly share information. Make this info accessible. It can be like even a single sentence on your application page. Number 3, raise the position cap. This one's a little bit nerdy. Each House member is limited to having 18 paid staff and 4 slots for other positions. A lot of these members represent big old districts with multiple offices. They simply reach that cap before they can even start paying their interns. Committee on House Administration, change this rule. And number 4, reinstate a paid congressional program. Remember the LBJ program we talked about earlier? 3 years later, the Lyndon B. Johnson Congressional Internship Program was created. So does Pay Our Interns. Now these weren't lofty goals. They weren't shooting for the moon, and that was intentional. They had all these people in the room with open ears, and the last thing they wanted to do after all this hard work was for those people to immediately dismiss their ideas as pie in the sky or unreasonable. This pragmatism received pushback from people they usually consider allies.
I had a friend and they were like, you need to go in there and you need to push for $15 an hour. You need to shame everyone.
The group really disagreed with going about this way.
If we're pushing for $15 an hour, we're gonna end where we started, which is with nothing.
To add on to what he's saying here, think of this as like one giant negotiation, but you're the one initiating it and you're also going in with very little leverage. Better yet, think of it as a Shark Tank episode. That's still on, right? They're on 358 episodes. Okay, so imagine you're going into the tank. I don't think I can clear YouTube's copyright system if I play that background music they use, but like, just picture it in your head. You know what it sounds like. Dun 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 dun. That one. I can already hear ABC's lawyers knocking at my door, you guys. If you're a Shark Tank enjoyer, I don't know. I'm sure you've seen people come in with these insanely high valuations, and before they can even negotiate the details, the sharks think they're so unwarranted and out there that they just go,
sorry, I'm out.
And so back to policy, if you go into what is essentially legislative negotiating with your guns ablazing, then a lot of times you're gonna get this.
I'm out.
Before you even get the chance to have a productive conversation with them. As one 2012 study in the Journal of Social Experimental Psychology found, extreme first offers can be risky in negotiations because they offend recipients and increase the risk of impasses. And yes, to many, including Carlos and Guillermo, Hill interns getting $15 an hour doesn't seem too extreme. But this is clearly not the case across the political spectrum. And with the GOP-controlled House and Senate, and Democrats still very clearly skittish on the issue, going in with this demand for essentially a legislative negotiation is not the way to go.
What's more important than even being right is having results and actually getting shit done.
Get shit Done. That's a good motto to live by. Okay, we've got our 3 streams: problem, politics, and policy. I presented you a, hopefully, in-depth look at how Pay Our Interns effectively utilize these 3 streams individually. So now what? And now a reminder of what certified smart person John Kingdon said earlier. At some critical junctures, the 3 streams are joined, and the greatest policy changes grow out of that coupling of problems, policy proposals, and politics. At this point, their movement was already making change. After a concerted mini pressure campaign, the Democratic National Committee started paying their interns in January of 2018. Offices like Senator Cory Booker also announced that they would start paying their interns. Pay Our Interns then enlisted the help of the Tiber Creek Group. This bipartisan lobbying firm
gave us a sort of legitimacy that we did not have.
This group, like D&P strategies from before, also granted Pay Our Interns the ability to make connections needed to needle their way onto the Hill. As Carlos pointed out,
that lobbyist was a colleague in so-and-so's office. So it just creates a sort of trust that you just don't have on your own.
The perfect storm was brewing, and the meetings that Pay Our Interns needed to have were taking place. However, meetings and general words of support can only get you so far. What they needed now was a congressional advocate willing to introduce their legislation.
How do we start growing surrogates for our campaign?
Thankfully, the group pretty much stumbled upon an important congressional champion all the way back in February 2017.
It was myself and then Senator Van Hollen. We both gave a speech for the Montgomery Democratic Party in Maryland. I spoke before Senator Van Hollen, and I basically kind of pushed Democrats like, hey, like, live your values. He got up. He actually announced that he would pay his interns. And I was just like, wow, like, we didn't have to pressure. Like, this is showing leadership from his part.
Van Hollen, a senator sworn in just 1 month ago, had already become one of the group's most staunch congressional advocates. He also played a highly outsized role of importance compared to some of his other colleagues in the Senate. He was on the Senate Appropriations Committee. Appropriations, if you don't know, basically are in charge of funding pretty much the entire federal government. It's kind of a big deal. Before spending bills make it to a full vote in the House and Senate, they have to go through their respective appropriations committees first. And this includes, wait for it, the legislative budget, the ability for Hillterns to get paid or not. And Senator Van Hollen just so happens to be on this all-important committee. Interesting. Not only did he follow through, he pushed the Appropriations Committee to research, said Carlos in an interview with the Washingtonian. And soon enough, other folks in House and Senate appropriations began to voice their support for paying interns. Hugely important coming from these people.
It was Tim Ryan. It was Brian Schatz.
Now I want you to take a trip down memory lane to me all the way back to 2018. It's been so long, I know. Ask yourself, what sort of news was dominating the time that year? There was a lot going on then, I know, but is there anything specifically in the House and Senate that you remember?
Government shutdown.
Shutdown, government shutdown.
A perpetual shutdown watch.
A Trump shutdown.
Government shutdown.
Appropriations was really having its spotlight then. And in late spring, early summer of 2018, the government was once again facing the prospect of another shutdown. The solution?
A minibus spending package.
So instead of passing a large omnibus to fund the entire federal government at once, Congress at this time was doing it in little itty bitty pieces. Little minibus bills. Interesting. It was a Hail Mary play, but Pay Our Interns finally had the chance to restore Hillturn pay with this minibus bill. And after some conversations,
Senator Brian Schatz from Hawaii had come up with this idea of a $5 million fund specifically for the Senate.
Guys, is this happening? Is the Senate going to reinstate intern pay?
In all these appropriations committees, their subcommittees, they introduced one bill. So they actually did it together.
Intern pay in the House too? Oh my gosh, you love to see a plan come together.
The chairman then, Senator Daines from Montana, did not want to include this $5 million fund.
Oh. Well, maybe you can just go around.
He's a chairman, and even if any other Republicans on the committee are sympathetic you're just not going to buck the chairman.
Well, how about you?
So this is dead on arrival.
Oh, okay. This sort of setback meant it could be a while till Pay Our Interns got this opportunity again. But Pay Our Interns wouldn't let these provisions go down without a fight, especially not after all the hard work and progress they've made.
I don't like taking no for an answer, and I think being a little delulu gets you a long way. We're gonna push for this until there is a vote.
It was a Hail Mary on top of a Hail Mary. And Pay Our Interns was burning the candle at both ends just to try and get this out of committee. But Chairman Daines wasn't budging.
I reached out to like college Democrats of Montana, college Republicans of Montana, like anyone that would listen to us, what kind of op-ed, to like pressure him.
But Daines still wasn't budging. What's there left to do? Unfortunately, it seems like the group is going to have to wait until the next opportunity crops up and continue their efforts.
For decades, the role of the intern was almost always unpaid. That is changing now. That's right, the Senate is going to start paying its interns.
Wait, what?
The night before, Senator Lisa Murkowski said, you know what, I'm gonna vote for this. And then Senator Susan Collins said, I'll vote for this.
How did this last minute shift happen? Well, Pay Our Interns can thank the Tiber Creek Group.
One of the lobbyists for them had worked for Senator Collins and had a connection with Senator Murkowski. So that is where having lobbyists, I think, was extremely instrumental and made the difference. Long story short, it's the markup, it's introduced, and it passes unanimously.
Unanimously, including Chairman Daines. On June 14th, 2018, the Senate Appropriations Committee approved $5 million to compensate Senate interns. This averaged to about $50,000 per office, albeit with some adjustments based on state population and other factors. But this victory didn't stop at the Senate. On September 5th, the House successfully followed their lead with Congressman Tim Ryan's bill. The House Appropriations Committee approved $8.8 million to compensate their interns, with each office receiving about $20,000 to pay interns. And on September 21st, 2018, this victory was solidified as President Donald Trump signed into law H.R. 5895. This minibus bill to partially fund the government included the $13.8 million allocated for Senate and House intern pay. In less than 2 years of operation, Pay Our Interns secured a Herculean victory. Interns on Capitol Hill would get their payback.
The victories were very overwhelming.
It really just like was a moment of joy because everyone thought that it would not happen.
It just felt surreal. Like, it wasn't like, we were like, what do you mean? Like, they actually adopted this? Like, they really, really want to do this?
What began as a Facebook group by two early 20-something former interns, frustrated with the way things were on the Hill, soon blossomed into a full-fledged movement. And through effective political communication that successfully joined Kingdon's 3 streams and a bit of good timing, they were able to overturn decades of precedent and secure internship pay once again on the Hill, all in less than 2 years. That's crazy. The 115th Congress saw 13,556 pieces of legislation introduced. 867 of those received a vote. 442 of those bills were passed into law. And 306 of these laws were substantive instead of ceremonial, and tucked away in a legislative branch bill as part of a minibus package to avoid a government shutdown was a single manager's amendment to pay Hillterns. This single manager's amendment was a victory that took thousands of meetings with legislators and a grassroots communication movement. Pay Our Interns got shit done, and their work wasn't over.
This was only going to be the beginning.
After this huge victory in 2018, Pay Our Interns still kept moving full steam ahead. This initial success
showed that we had legs to stand on.
They were kind of a big deal now, you guys. But even with this elevated status on the Hill, there were still growing pains surrounding their hard-fought legislation. From implementation to adoption, Congress was still dragging its feet after being given the money. During this critical period, Pay Our Interns had to transition from policy advocates to almost like policy hall monitors for a bit.
Offices themselves started reaching out and saying, okay, what do we do? Again, we're two 22, 23-year-old individuals who were like, what do you mean? And we had to come up with a plan.
Luckily, the group had more helpful allies to aid them through this process. And they even were able to secure more funding along the way. One freshly elected incoming congresswoman from New York even became a key ally for the group before she was even sworn in. Can you guess who? This was just one of the many tweets of hers that went viral as AOC promised to pay her interns $15 an hour. On National Interns Day 2019, Pay Our Interns even got to film a video for Now This with Representatives Ocasio-Cortez, Presley, Tlaib, and more, where the message was clear.
Experience doesn't pay the bill!
In May 2019, Tim Ryan secured an additional $2.565 million for congressional intern pay, to reach $11.4 million total. And in 2020, when the pandemic hit, Pay Our Interns was able to change the rules so that interns could work remotely.
We had the Progressive Caucus signed onto it, members of the squad, the House Freedom Caucus signed into it. I mean, it's just like you talk about the full range, and we got the change.
Without those new rules, interns could not legally work during the lockdown. By June 2021, adoption had also thankfully picked up rapidly. Pay Our Interns reported that in under 3 years, the percentage of House offices that paid interns rose from 10% to 90%. Folks, I crunched the numbers and that's a lot more. Pay Our Interns also set their sights beyond the Hill. During the Biden administration, the group secured major victories in the executive branch. By March 2022, the group boasted $4.5 million in White House funding to pay White House and executive office interns, and $8 million in State Department funding. And on top of that, 3 more wins in congressional funding. This would be the first time in history the White House would offer paid internships. The first time ever. And while this was happening, the group was even expanding its efforts into state government advocacy. Pay Our Interns was taking a trip to Hotel California in order to spread their advocacy beyond the swamp. It really seemed like Pay Our Interns was expanding into this sort of unstoppable machine. But then in October 2023, the org experienced a massive leadership change. Carlos announced that he would be stepping down as executive director to pursue a new role managing the Equity Fellowship program at the Harvard Business School. When we founded Pay Our Interns, we had no money, jobs, or degrees to fall back on. We did have grit, an arc towards justice, and a vision. A vision where someone's socioeconomic status did not determine what kind of career they would pursue. That's what kept me going through the years. While my time leading Pay Our Interns is ending, the organization's work is far from over. This came from his farewell letter, the last press release posted to Pay Our Interns' website. Guillermo was then named interim executive director, with the goal of hiring a permanent replacement early the next year. However, this replacement never came to fruition, as Guillermo himself also took a bit of a step back from the organization. He now serves as the director of residential services at the nonprofit Thrive Support and Advocacy. Pay Our Interns has also been inactive on Instagram since July 2023 and inactive on Facebook since July 2024. The group's Twitter account still posts occasionally on the platform. In our current age of politics, Guillermo also sees this silence as an act of strategic defense.
I think one of the most critical things that a lot of groups are doing is just kind of staying under the radar.
Much like how the 90s saw that immense budget slashing, Guillermo fears a similar move amid the current government. And he's not really going off of nothing here either. Tens of thousands of federal workers are already being laid off or fired left and right in the name of government efficiency. Paid interns are unfortunately an easy target if placed in the direct line of fire. And with so much of Pay Our Interns' efforts being centered around equal representation, Guillermo fears that they may be labeled and targeted as a DEI operation.
Unfortunately, that's so weaponized nowadays that it doesn't make sense to truly be out there advocating for things for the reflection of this country.
Pay Our Interns recognizes the precarious political situation they're in and wants to avoid poking the hornet's nest. And yet, unfortunately for the movement, a lot of their fears have already come true. The second Trump administration has already reversed a lot of the policies that Pay Our Interns has tirelessly fought for. In March 2025, the Trump administration canceled the entire State Department internship program for the upcoming summer as part of their federal hiring freeze. In April 2025, the Trump administration quietly made the White House internship program unpaid again. At the time of this video, interns are still getting paid on the Hill. As of fiscal year 2025, the House currently allocates around $24.3 million annually to pay interns, and the Senate around $7 million. And so as silence reigns supreme right now as the golden rule of politics for Pay Our Interns, what is there left to do? I struggle with this idea. Like, this can't be the ellipses that we leave the incredible story of Pay Our Interns on right now, can it? And then I remembered something. The reach of Pay Our Interns can be felt nationwide, far outside the political sphere.
The top 100 museums in the country worked with us to ensure that they had paid internship opportunities.
I've helped a lot, payment for placements. It's a grassroots movement pushing for social work students to get paid.
We had members of the fashion industry who would also reach out to us for advice on how they could do this and implement this in their industry.
There's a whole world outside of politics. Crazy thought, right? Silicon Valley, sports journalism, nonprofits. There's an entire ecosystem out there of unpaid internships that are leaving young professionals frustrated. Pay Our Interns tackled unpaid internships head on in DC, and in the process created a rich blueprint chock full of communication campaign tips that bring people together. They make John Kingdom proud, that's for sure. College students across the country are all having that same spark Carlos and Guillermo had, questioning just how ethical unpaid internships are. And we're already seeing communities like social work interns start to mobilize against unpaid internships. I can't say it'll start via a Facebook group or not, but I have to wonder, who's the next unpaid intern that's gonna rise up and start a movement in their industry? Is it you?